Welcome to today's Homeschool Mom Chat. I'm Teresa Wiedrich. I am a graduated homeschool mom turned certified life coach in the homeschool mom space. I'm here to help you shed what's not working so you can show up in your homeschool and your mom life on purpose. So if we haven't met, you're welcome to check out all the different things I have as resources below. And just so you know, I've been there where you are in whatever challenges that you're experiencing presently, or whatever exciting moments and memories you're locking up in your mind today. This homeschool mom life is beautiful, sometimes complicated, sometimes challenging, but I'm so glad that you've joined that journey just like I have experienced over the last couple decades, because it is a beautiful one. But there are certain moments that are especially challenging. And I want to tell you about a moment that really changed my trajectory and how I approached everything in my homeschool life. It was not just my homeschool life, it was all of my life. It was a tool that I was introduced to by a fellow named Dr. Daniel Amen. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Let me know in the comments if you've met him before. I actually got to meet him live about 15 years ago. He presented a workshop. He was bringing a brain scanner to our town, and he was introducing us to thinking our thoughts and being intentional about our thoughts. Well, up until this point, I think I had 3, maybe 4 kids at the time. At this point, I remember thinking in that moment, in that workshop, that what is this he's talking about? I can actually ask myself what I'm thinking. I can actually get clearer on what I'm feeling and why I'm feeling what I'm feeling. It sounded odd to me. I just assumed that there was just too much going on. There were too many activities. There were, I think the lifestyle. And it was a revolutionary moment, or about a revolutionary hour for me. He brought us through 3 or 4 questions that I later came to understand weren't his questions, but they were actually Byron Katie's questions that helped me to clarify what I was thinking, why I was thinking, and why I was thinking that thought, how it was affecting me in my body, how I was feeling about the scenario, whatever the scenario was. And that moment is probably one of the very first moments that had such a big transformation on how I approached everything. So that was my experience. I would like to hear from you how much you're aware how your thoughts are influencing your homeschool day. So before we get started, I'd love to hear how you're feeling too. If you want to put an emoji in the comment section, let me know. If it's a great day, fabulous. And if you feel like, wow, this is just an overwhelming day, totally cool. I want you to be real. I want you to feel like this space is a space where you can be real. And yes, if you can't stay, Lori, that's no problem. Then I will see you or you can listen to me later as well. That's great. I hope it's a good day. So what I learned, and I have discovered that this is applicable to pretty much every challenge we have, whether it's a challenge with addressing our big emotions or our children's, whether it's a relational challenge, whether it's clarifying how many things we want on our extracurricular list this week or this season. Pretty much anything related to the homeschool mom life is that we want to be able to check in with what we're really thinking and how we're feeling. There is a mom who I am going to call Anna for the sake of this discussion. She shared this. She's a homeschool mom of 4 kids. And she shared, right now, my homeschool mom life is so unorganized. It's a mess and it's hard. We've done a lot of changing. We had a big move as we were building our home. My teaching is an ebb and flow over the years, but right now I feel like I'm in fight or flight. I've definitely flown. I fight depression, anxiety, and OCD tendencies. I just feel so alone, and I'm wondering what a coach like you could bring to the table. Maybe if I have someone walking alongside me, which I don't have at all, I could be who I know I could be. I'm desperate at this point, and my kids deserve better. So those are the direct words from a mom I'll call Anna, who is a mom of 4 kids. And if it isn't that scenario, it's many other scenarios similar to it. Certainly I've shared this many times, whether on podcast or anywhere on socials. it is that if you are experiencing something that you feel like, I am all alone in this, I can guarantee you, you're not. When I wrote my book in 2018, I thought I was being pretty vulnerable and open in what I was sharing and what my experiences were myself. And I learned that I was, because I've heard since that a lot of people tell me they hadn't seen somebody be quite as honest about what this life can be like. And since then, over the last 5 or so years, I have recognized on repeat that we are very common in our experiences. Though we have different elements of our life, we have different people and players in our lives, we have different focus in our homeschool mom intentions or our homeschool intentions, we have very similar challenges. And you can often look at them and go, that is not that much different than something else. And so I was emboldened over the last 5 years listening to other women's stories that me being honest about what's been the hard stuff and what's been the amazing stuff, but all of it, when I'm honest and I'm vulnerable about those things, I invite other people to be vulnerable. And that I'm all in for. So this thing about our thoughts and our emotions, do you even spend any time thinking, what are my thoughts? Like, you just don't have time for this. And I know you don't, or at least we don't think we do. And I certainly felt that same way, that there's just too many appointments, or there's too much laundry piled on the bed, or there's too many things I need to go do outside of this home, let alone the things that are inside of this home. And then, of course, there's the children. And that probably sounds familiar. I wonder if you've actually ever tried to sit still and just listen to your head. Yes, exactly. Ashley, I think that's Ashley, right? I'm always in my head. Yes, which I don't know if you're familiar with Enneagram, but I find Enneagram a really useful tool to try to understand my thoughts as well. So our thoughts, yes, we're always in our head, but we're not always aware that our thoughts are actually shaping our feelings. There's a connection between the two. Sometimes when we haven't been acknowledging our feelings or how we're experiencing those feelings in our body, those feelings are energy in motion. That's what emotion is, energy in motion, and it has to go somewhere. So where does it go? Well, it goes in a variety of places, but it doesn't disappear. It stays in our bodies. It stays in our continual experience. It sometimes erupts. Can I hear an amen? And it erupts differently. Some of us like to hide in the closet with a box of Oreos, not that I'm being specific for any particular reason. Or some of us like to just let it flow outward. Or sometimes we get passive aggressive, all sorts of possibilities. But our emotions go somewhere and we need to address them. So if you've ever heard me say this, every 11 a.m. every Monday morning was probably my hottest trigger of the week, because I was on a mission to do whatever it was I had on my list. And so I was like, okay, it's Monday. Let's get motivated. It's exciting. I've got all of these wonderful things planned for us this week. And it turns out I was the only one that motivated. The kids, not so much. So 11 a.m. was oftentimes my trigger point, but I've heard many other options as trigger points, especially around dinner time, at the end of the night, when people are like, just one more song, can you sing one more song or read one more book? And you're like, no, I can't. I need to go. But then you stay because you feel like you need to, but then you feel this intense emotion. Y'all may be different. We're all different, but we have certain moments of the day when we're more likely to be affected. So when you are, that is the time you want to put a reminder or an alarm in your phone that reminds you to stop, pause, put your hand on your heart. You can even do it with me now if you want. Put your hand on your heart and just notice what's going on in my body. Not just what's going on in my head, but where do I feel? Where do I feel what I feel in my body? Do I feel like a quickening in my stomach? Do I feel like I'm breathing faster than I need to be? Do I feel heat anywhere? Butterflies? What am I feeling? As soon as you start to slow down like that, things slow down. You're essentially triggering your parasympathetic nervous system to help push the slow brakes on your intense emotions, especially if you're taking a deep breath along with putting your hand on your heart. So just take a breath with me now. Then hold it for a few beats at the top and exhale like a straw through your mouth. Try that again, but when you exhale, do it for 8 beats. I typically do that 3 times at 11 a.m. most days, unless I'm in coaching with you. But 11 a.m. every day, I'm doing that. And I do it 3 times, and I can feel that my body slows down. I can feel that I get more in touch with my body. And then it's an opportunity for us to ask ourselves, so what are we feeling? What are our thoughts? What are the preoccupying thoughts that we've been having? You could write it down, because I like to think that the journal is a resource for you to get what's in your head on the paper. So what are your thoughts? Or what was the precipitating thought to an intense feeling that you've had? Was there a certain moment in the day that felt especially triggering? Write it down. Have you ever caught yourself thinking something like this? I'm not getting enough done today. This day is a disaster. I hear that often. Apparently she doesn't. She doesn't really do a lot, so maybe she should. But many homeschool moms definitely don't feel like they're doing enough. Or they say something like, I can't do this, there's too many emotions, this feels too intense, I am definitely not cut out for this homeschooling thing. Been there? Common refrain, common conversation point that I have as a conversation with moms. Sometimes we need to create boundaries around our thoughts. We often think about boundaries with other people, but we're in a relationship with ourselves too. So asking ourselves, okay, I know you thought that thing at that certain point of the day that was triggering, but is it true, that thought? Now that you've seen it on paper after you've journaled it, or maybe you've said it outside of your body and you looked at yourself in the mirror as you said, this is what I'm thinking. You can ask yourself, is it true? Is it helpful? Is it unhelpful? How is it influencing how I'm engaging someone else or how I'm feeling in the moment? So I'm curious what one unhelpful thought you've had this week. You're welcome to share it in the chat. I recognize that that's pretty vulnerable, being out there like what I'm doing, but I invite you to do that if you feel comfortable. You don't even have to solve it right away. There is something sort of magic wand energy-ish when we just say something out loud. It helps us to identify it and somehow dispels or dissipates a little bit of the intensity as we just put it outside of ourselves. So question, now that we've talked about emotions, homeschooling brings out a lot of big emotions, as I've seen. And oftentimes when I start talking about homeschooling and big emotions, people assume I'm talking about their kids. And of course I am. But also, since most of us haven't had a real solid training in how to address our emotions or even feel them or act like they matter, we need to get a solid training in it ourselves before we assume we can address our kids' big emotions. Some days it feels like, and I hear this from a lot of moms, that they feel like they're going to lose it. On the podcast episode that I released today, I was talking about being fed up with homeschooling. That's another way people refer to it, especially in this season. They feel fed up or they're burned out. We'll see you later. Naturally, screaming kids. Yes. I will have this on YouTube later as well. But sometimes we feel like there's just too much. Like this moment for Ashley. This is exactly the kind of thing that I am referring to. You're like, okay, we are going to do X, or I'm going to have this uninterrupted time here for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, and then I'm going to move to the next thing. Alas, 'tis not so. Interruptions are par for the course if we're a homeschool mom. But here's what I've learned. Our emotions begin in our heads. They come from our thoughts. You could say, for example, this is a different scenario than what Ashley's experiencing right now, probably, maybe, but maybe you're thinking, my kids are never going to learn how to manage their time. That thought then brings up a feeling of anxiety or frustration. But if I think my kids are learning valuable lessons about time management through their mistakes, that thought shifts my emotional state to something obviously more peaceful and optimistic. So I'm curious if there is a thought that's making you feel your big emotions today. I'd be happy to walk through some of those challenges. You're welcome to join me in coaching. If you want to join me for a no obligation conversation to learn more about how coaching might benefit you, you're welcome to do that. I can do that practically if you're here presently. Okay, so the next thing that I do is to create space for our thoughts. It's important for us to honor and acknowledge ourselves as human beings that have needs, just like our children have needs, that we need to honor ourselves just as much as we need to honor our kids. And I know that when we're homeschooling, we're constantly moving. We are, unless we're sitting on the couch reading to a child or listening to them or sitting beside them at a table. But in our heads, there's always what's next. We want to ask that question. What's the next thing that we need to do? Where do we need to go next? What are the activities that are required to be done by the end of the day? One child pulls you away from this activity and now you get pulled back to another one. And it is really hard to imagine that we could create space to just stop, pause, feel our feelings and ask ourselves how we're doing today. It seems like it would be unreasonable, but I've learned from experience that building in margins just to ask myself how I'm feeling, to check in with myself. Take that long, slow, deep breath. Allow the parasympathetic nervous system to do its thing and to slow down all of my body. Maybe it's including a mindfulness moment or a meditation or a prayer or a quick breathing exercise. But I know it's hard to find that time. But when we do, and we do it on repeat, we get more familiar with our emotional climate. We get more familiar with what's really going on in there. What are our emotional triggers? What are the things that are the most challenging elements of our homeschool mom lives? Okay, so let's do something together, just to give you a taste of how it feels to observe your thoughts without judgment. So close your eyes for a second. If you can't, no worries, I get it. But just take a deep breath and focus. Just allow whatever to come up. So maybe I'll do it with you. Take a long, slow, deep breath in. Notice where you feel it. Then hold it at the top for about 4 beats. Exhale through your mouth slowly, about 8 beats. What's the first thoughts that you're having? Breathe in again. Hold it at the top, 4 beats, and exhale, 8 beats. Just notice what's going on in your body. When you begin to recognize your thoughts, that's when you can learn to separate yourself from your thoughts. Who knew there was a potential to separate your thoughts from the feelings inside of your body, inside of your head? If you have a chance, you could grab your journal and write down your first thoughts. One thing I've learned from this exercise that Dr. Daniel Amen first introduced me to was that when we question our thought, that frustrating moment where we first thought, oh, that kid, they are always ... you fill in the blank, or they'll never learn to manage their time, or you fill in the blank, whatever your experience is today. I've learned that we can reframe the story. We can understand the story differently. We can shift our perspective. So where instead of thinking I'm failing because my kids are behind, What if we told ourselves we're making progress and we're doing our best, we're learning? That perspective shift is one thought at a time. It takes practice to reinforce those thoughts, just like it took us practice to reinforce the unhelpful negative thoughts. But those unhelpful negative thoughts are deeply influencing how you're experiencing your homeschool mom life. There is I call it like an emotional climate. It's like a weather system. You getting to know what you think, when you think it, what are the circumstances around that thought challenge. Sometimes I think it's a really important one to identify that the PMS week is a really significant few days or a week that is influencing how we're experiencing life. Also perimenopause, it's just a whole lot less predictable, certainly postpartum and pregnancy, and many other factors, but those are pretty common for many people. And when we get familiar with our emotional climate, when we spend time asking ourselves, what am I thinking here? What was the unhelpful thought? That is the step toward reinforcing healthier approach to our relationships, a healthier approach to the feelings that we feel, our relationship to ourselves. It is a healthier way to approach life. It was an incredibly impactful moment for me when I was in that workshop with Daniel Amen. So grab your journals. These are the final questions for this live. Let's wrap up with a couple questions for you to reflect. One is, what's one thought you'd like to reframe today? And how can you show up more intentionally in your homeschool by choosing your thoughts? I would love to hear your thoughts. If you would share your thoughts below. I am confident that if you put this practice into practice, you will discover that you feel a whole lot less frustrated and in fight or flight, like Anna was sharing at the beginning of this live conversation. You're going to feel more present. You're going to ask yourself why you're doing the activities you're doing. You're going to ask yourself if you've been misunderstanding a certain person, or if you can shift a perspective on how you relate to someone. You're going to decide how you're going to show up as a homeschool mom in your life, in all the different areas of your life. I found this to be the most important thought care practice. I actually created a PDF that will actually be found in the Reimagine Your Homeschool mini course, but it's like a reminder of what these questions are and how to use them. For many years, I pinned them or I take them to my mirror. And when I was really frustrated, I would head to the mirror and I would do that exercise that I showed you. And then I would go through the questions. And now I've spoken those questions so many times to so many moms in so many places online that I know them well. And they still are my common refrain for myself, though. They're not just for you, they're for me too. And they are certainly for Anna. So when she shares that she feels desperate at this point and she really doesn't know how to get over this unorganized mess in her head and in her life, I would start with that. I would say, let's talk about what's going on in here. So if you want to talk to me directly, you're welcome to book a no obligation conversation to chat about coaching and whether or not it would be beneficial for you or how you could incorporate this practice in your homeschool mom life so you don't feel so disorganized and unstructured and unhappy. Then I'd be glad to meet you on the other side of the screen. So I hope you have a beautiful week and we'll talk to you soon.